Bruce, back to Greenbelt, third visit, and a much looked forward to main stage set. So we're really looking forward to tonight. Everyone is very excited, as you can see. And the tent could not be fuller, so the asking of questions is going to be a bit difficult. We can't possibly get the roving mic round. So when you ask questions, I'll repeat them, so people who haven't heard know what's been said, and so it goes on the tape. Bruce, you did a warehouse in '87. Hands up people who were at that, actually.
Nothing's changed.
No, that's the first question. What have you been doing since '87?
I seem to have been, whatever it was non-stop. Since then, that was the beginning of a solo tour that took me around Northern Europe and North America. And then I went to Central America for a few weeks. Then we did an album, and then I went to Mozambique. And then I did a cross-Canada speaking tour. And then we started on this tour after the album came out, which this tour has been going on since the middle of February. So.
And where have you been on this tour?
Just North America till just now.
And I hear the album's going really well in North America.
It's done very well. It went gold, if that means anything, very quickly in Canada. It's done less well in the States, but it's gotten a fair amount of attention from college radio and that sort of thing. The environment is a fashionable cause at the moment, and the fact that there's a song about that on the album has done good things for it. Thanks.
And this date tonight is the start of a European tour, is that right?
Basically, yeah. We'll be in Europe
actually,
until...
you've done a date, haven't you?
We did the WOMAD Festival the other day down in Cornwall. And then we're on to the continent, which will take us up until the 24th when we're back in England to play the Town and Country. And then we go back to Canada and play 3 more shows, and then it's over, I think. Unless we get to go to Australia, which is a slight possibility for November.
Let's open it out. Start waving your hands, and then I'll start with someone close, because I know I can hear that, and then I'll try and spot you as I come round.
What are your influences and what music do you like listening to?
Okay, that's an easy one to repeat. And then you have an hour to answer. What are your influences, and what do you like listening to musically?
Basically, I get influenced by everything I hear that I like, which is a lot of different things, you know. Sometimes, well, who am I listening to at the moment? The Pogues, Elvis Costello's new album is really good, the Lou Reed New York album. Those are of the sort of pop spectrum. That's what I've been listening to most lately, but I still sort of keep my ears open to whatever comes along, you know, and sometimes there's some very interesting things. Bernie, my manager, just got hold of an album that was recorded in the 60s by some guy from Sierra Leone, and it's a beautiful record, a sort of folky electric guitar thing that from that period in that place, and I'd never heard anything quite like that before. So it's just it's a question of being open, and whenever something comes along that is really interesting like that, it usually ends up working its way into the music somehow.
Okay.
When you were here 2 years ago, you described yourself, your early musical influences as being like Bob Dylan in the 60s. Now, at the time when I think the rock music was becoming senile, quite smug and complacent, your music has become more and more angry in the 1980s. So my question is, do you still believe in the power of rock music to bring about change in the world?
I'll praise you that. Do you still believe in the power of rock music to change things in the world?
Yeah, and maybe just for the benefit of people in the back, the gentleman was using as a jumping off point the fact that a couple of years ago I said that people like Bob Dylan were role models in the beginning when I first started writing, which is true. I never really believed in the power of rock music to change anything. I think certainly rock music, good music of any kind, has the power to touch people in various ways, and rock music generally gets to the body center pretty well when it's happening. Although most of what you hear on the radio is, I would agree, is senile. There's a lot of good energy bubbling under there too, you know. There are still great songwriting being done, and there is still the capacity for that music to touch people. That capacity has become a marketable entity over the years. So now you get, even on the good side of things, you get this sort of mega benefits and concerts for this and that with big stars, and that has a certain usefulness, but it's a limited use. You know, I mean, there's no follow-up to that, and there's a very short attention span on the part of the media for those kinds of things. So, you know, they only have a limited value there. But there's no question in my mind that as long as you're able to touch people as individuals, whether it's through music or through direct contact, that you're there is a possibility of accomplishing something.
Wait, man.
Do I go back and what?
Revise the songs. Once you've written them, do you go back and revise them?
I do a fair amount of revision on the songs before anybody gets to hear them. That's something that's developed over the long time that I've been writing songs. In the beginning, I tended to write it, and if it worked, and if it didn't, I'd throw it away. But now I tend to work on them more and more, partly because there's a lot of stuff that I've said, and I don't want to repeat myself, and partly because I guess I'm a little fussier than I used to be. But once the song has been recorded, I don't tend to change it that much, certainly not lyrically. Musically, the arrangements may undergo some reworking, as anybody who comes to the show tonight will hear. There'll be a couple of things that are quite different from the recorded versions.
The Big Circumstance is an hour of music. Did you have difficulty even choosing that? I mean, have you got a lot of stuff at the moment you'd like to put out?
That was everything we had.
Well, thanks for putting it all on. It's a bargain. Yeah. We'll spot some people at the back in a minute.
Last time we played here, it was recorded for Radio 1. When he went out there, he edited
I'll repeat it.
I'll repeat it. No, let me.
Okay, yeah. Do your job first.
No, I did tell Bruce this because when we listened to it, we were amazed at the missing line. But when Bruce was here last time, they recorded it for Radio 1, and they edited out the line, "They don't give a flying fuck," which meant that the song didn't rhyme and had a sort of hiccup in. What was the end of the question, actually? Yeah, how does that make you feel?
Well,
it made us laugh.
It doesn't really. Yeah, I mean, it's more laughable than anything else. It's sort of pathetic, but I mean, considering what passes for, you know, public information in Britain and other media, it seems sort of redundant to kind of edit out a word like "fuck." You know, I mean, you've got these newspapers with, you know, references to boobs all over them and that sort of thing, and a completely obscene use of the details of human life and of the human body. So it seems a bit silly to worry about a word like that. But if, you know, I think it's probably just somebody fearing for their job prospects. You know, just in case the powers heard it and went, "Oh goodness, we'll fire that person right away." You know? They couldn't fire me, so they'd fire the guy who edited the show. You know.
Lady in Orange. The question is, will the set be the same as for WOMAD, or will you bring your Christian stuff out? And I'd like to add, which is your Christian stuff, Bruce?
Yeah, Yeah, but I know what you mean, though. Anyway. Dweller by a Dark Stream. Yeah, actually, that's I won't be doing that song because I can't remember it. But yeah. But there will be some songs that didn't appear in the WOMAD set too. I mean, it's not for any particular reason other than that this is a different atmosphere and we'll probably do it slightly differently. We also have a different length of time that we're allowed to play. You know. 8 hours, you said? Yeah,
Don't, I'm already in trouble this weekend for letting this run on. Yeah.
I very much enjoyed your song Gospel of Bondage on Big Circumstance. Do you actually try and distance yourself away from sort of the right wing of Christianity in North America?
Having enjoyed the song Gospel of Bondage on Big Circumstance, the question is, do you try and distance yourself from the right wing evangelical Christianity in America? Did you say evangelical or Christianity?
I would have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing very well revising the questions as they come past.
That's a leader's supposed to do that. Yeah, in a way, it's unfortunately been necessary to do that. When I first became a Christian, I had no hesitation whatever, and still don't really, about saying so. You know, saying that I'm a Christian and making my beliefs public to whoever was willing to listen to them. But at that point, you know, I was sort of naive about a lot of things. It was new to me, and I was sort of accepting of everything that passed itself off as Christianity and looking for the good in it all. And I think I can say I made a pretty sincere effort to do that. Some elements, however, I found wanting, and that whole, as you said, right-wing evangelical end of things seemed to me to be fraught with spiritual peril, you know, for the people involved more than for me, because it didn't take very long. It didn't take a very long flirtation with that for me to get turned off. I was actually, I'm sorry I forgot to wear that T-shirt today that I had on yesterday, because somebody gave me a great T-shirt with a sort of picture of your archetypal TV evangelist on it, and the caption is, "The bigger the hair, the closer to God."
He's got a great quiff, and there's a measure by the side so you can see how tall it is.
How tall the hair really is, yeah, and that's a sort of, you know, aimed at the Jimmy Swaggart type of Southern evangelist. I mean, I don't want to tar all evangelicals with that brush by any means. There's a very large strain of the evangelical end of the church in North America that's nothing but positive as far as I can see. But there is that element of that sort of professional Christian, you know, that's dedicated more to making money to support itself and to fighting the bugbear of communism than it is aimed at edifying people spiritually. And that, in doing so, especially in that latter context, it's found itself allied with some very strange bedfellows. The American Nazi Party, the Moonies, you know, there's a whole sort of network of those kinds of people that runs this, that joins under the banner of the World Anti-Communist League, and there you get, you know, the Falwell, the CIA, Reverend Moon, you know, any number of shady neo-fascist organizations, all meeting under this heading, and in fact meeting in the flesh as well as symbolically, and that to me is pretty far removed from anything I understand Christianity to be.
Yeah, is the church in Canada more sympathetic to the cause of social justice and concern? We don't really hear much about it. And secondly, any chance of a Welsh accent?
Is the church in Canada more sympathetic to social justice end of things? Because we don't know much about the church in Canada. And also, any chance of a gig in Wales? Not this tour.
Not this tour, no. I'd love to come to Wales, though, sometime. The church in Canada is it's a funny entity. I mean, you can't really refer to the church in Canada. It's too fragmentary, same as it is in the States. You have to sort of think of which church, because the mainstream churches, the traditional ones, have become quite socially active. Again, as in the States, the more fundamentalist, Pentecostal-leaning types are less so, or where they are socially concerned, it's generally, they unfortunately have leagued themselves with the powers that be in third world countries so that they can more easily get the word around, but in doing so they end up supporting the status quo in an unfortunate way. That doesn't mean there's not some good things about what they're doing, but generally, I mean, the church is it's not a highly visible part of the Canadian scene. It's less noticeable in Canada than it is in the U.S., and I don't know enough about England to make a pronouncement about that one way or the other. But there is some very vibrant life in some aspects of the church, but you find it in little groups. You find if you look at the Lutheran church, it may look sort of namby-pamby, but then there'll be a youth group somewhere in the country that's doing really great things, or some one wing of the church somewhere that's really happening. And the same is true of the Anglican church and the Catholic church and so on.
In black by the pole. Who do you think your audience are now, and who do you think your musical contemporaries are now?
I don't know if I have a very clear picture of either group in my mind. I mean, I'm looking around at some faces here, and you know, who are you all? You know, like that's it. I mean, the letters I get from people indicate that there's quite a wide range of ages and kinds of experience among the people that are listening to my stuff, but I mean, that's really the only source of feedback I have about that. When on the one or two occasions that I get to see people coming into shows, it's the same kind of thing. I see quite a wide variety of looks of people, but I don't really know what that means, you know. I mean, the only generalization I can make is obviously they're willing to put out a certain amount of effort to get into what they're hearing, because it's not, you know, it's mostly not simple stuff anyway. So that presupposes, you know, some level of openness, I suppose, on the part of my audience, and that's something that I'm sort of proud of in a way. But and that and a certain loyalty, because obviously if there's some older faces that I see around that have been there since the beginning and have stayed right along, and then I appreciate that a lot too. As far as my own musical contemporaries go, there's a lot of people as old as me recording at this point, but I don't really identify with most of them very much. The singer-songwriter movement, of which I suppose I'm a part, that started in the 60s, with some notable exceptions, isn't doing too much. And some of the people who are doing interesting things are more interesting now than they were then. Jackson Browne, for instance, I think is doing a lot better stuff now than, to my taste anyway, than he did when he started out. Joni Mitchell is still doing good stuff, as she did in the beginning. But I identify myself more with the songwriters that I hear that are new to me, that I like. Chrissie Hynde, the Pogues, that genre more than the people that are of my age.
This question came from heaven, and it sort of floated down on a piece of paper and landed beside me, and it's from someone on the perimeter who obviously can't face shouting. George Hamilton IV recorded an album including a song of yours years ago, and it mentioned you in a band pre-69, and this person is obviously someone who is struggling to get the whole collection.
One of my contemporaries.
Did your pre-solo band record any albums?
There were a number of pre-solo bands None of them any good.
But did they record any albums?
No, actually. There were a couple of songs of mine that were recorded by different people in the early days, but no, we never got to more than the sort of lame demo tapes.
Yeah.
Once you were wondering where the lions were at. You have a pretty sharp vision of where the lions are. Where do you look for them?
Once you were wondering where the lions were, now you seem to know where the lions were, but where do you look for hope?
To God, I guess. You know, I mean, I don't think about it too much. A lot. I mean, in the immediate sense, I get a recharge in the hope department every time I go to a country like Mozambique or Nicaragua, you know, or Nepal for that matter. You just see that people living in desperate conditions are able to deal with it and are able to carry on with some sense of continuity, some hope for the future. And that's a real hope that is quite unlike the kind of hope that we in the developed world have to manufacture for ourselves. It's hard to feel hopeful in an atmosphere like the one most of us live in, I find. It's easy to become cynical and hardened, and it's almost necessary to survive and to maintain a properly critical attitude toward your surroundings. But in less developed countries, where people don't have the luxury of being cynical, they really need whatever hope they can get, and they have it. And I think certainly in the Central American context, which is the one like that I'm most familiar with, that hope comes a lot from God too. You know, it's that's the subject, or in a way the issue I was trying to get across with this song called "Where the Death Squad Lives," because it's really become evident that no matter how much repression is forced on the heads of those people, that there's still something else that's coming down on their heads as well, of a much more profound and beautiful sort.
Do you think that your love for the third world will pull you out of music back into
Do you think that your love for the third world might pull you out of music and into working among those people?
I don't think I have any usable skills, you know, in terms of working among people in the third world. I don't have anything to give them that they don't have already, except my ability to generate public support for them in places like Canada. I mean, that's about all I have to offer them, and that's what I'm doing my best to offer. But I don't know. I mean, I guess if somebody, you know, if I was shown some other way to do things, it's a possibility. It's something I don't spend a lot of time thinking about.
You mentioned after the trip to Mozambique that you did a speaking tour. Had you done that before, after third world trips?
No, I hadn't. And although I'd done PR, various sorts, press and that sort of thing, but this sort of public speaking business was quite a horrifying prospect, actually, when I started. But as it went along, it got easier. It worked out very well, too. It was mostly on college campuses and other kinds of public meetings. The turnouts were generally quite good, and the response was good. The situation in Mozambique, I don't know how familiar it is to people in Britain, but in Canada it's virtually unknown. It's had maybe, I think this figure was 8 mentions in all of the all of the newspapers in Canada over the past 15 years or so. So people generally don't know anything at all about it. Most people that I mentioned that I was going there to before I left didn't even know where it was. Oh, that's that big island off the coast of Africa, right? You know, or something like that. So it was a very worthwhile thing in the end, because quite a lot of people ended up knowing more about it than before.
Can you bear to tell us a bit about it without doing the complete speaking thing? I mean, what was the what were the main things you actually got to look at, and what sort of hope did you see from that situation, from those people?
Well, it's pretty bleak. lately I've heard that there are negotiations in progress, and there's some murmurings about Renamo stopping its operations and so on. For those who don't know, Renamo is an acronym for Mozambican National Resistance, which is an organization roughly analogous to the Contra in Nicaragua that's supported instead of being supported by the United States, it's supported by South Africa. And it has even less, if it's possible, political legitimacy in Mozambique than the Contras do in Nicaragua. It doesn't even have, even within itself, it has no mandate to try to overthrow the government of Mozambique and replace it with anything. Its sole function is to destroy, to destabilize. And it's been very effective at that. It's been in operation under the South Africans since 1980. And it's very well armed and I can't say well trained exactly, but heavily motivated with pressure of various kinds and drugs, and it's been very good at spreading terror on a huge scale around the country. You can't travel in Mozambique except by air from city to city. There are convoys, everything, all the commerce that has to go by road from town to town goes by means of armed convoys, or occasionally when they can get a train through on the train tracks, they do it that way. But the armed convoys are still subject to attack randomly here and there in the country. And the tactics of Renamo are quite spectacularly ugly. It's not just a case of attack a strategic target and shoot it up and move on. It's not standard guerrilla warfare in that sense. It's concerted attacks on the civilian population, on medical centers, on schools. Teachers are a particularly favorite target, and very often those teachers, rather than being killed, teachers, doctors, and so on, or anybody else that looks like they're in league with the government, rather than being killed, they'll be mutilated in a variety of ways, having their lips cut off or noses cut off, and then set free. So there's quite a number of people running around Mozambique missing their full complement of body parts, and it's not a pretty sight. At the same time, the government forces in Mozambique have received a lot of help from Zimbabwe and Tanzania, so there is one very important road and rail corridor in the country that is kept open. You might wonder why this is going on, and I guess I should just address that. The Mozambique, if you picture it as, of course, on the coast of Africa, borders on South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Tanzania, and Zambia. It's got the only working seaports for those landlocked frontline states other than South African ports. There's one similar port in Angola, but it's been cut off for years because of the war there. So those ports in Mozambique are of great strategic importance, and consequently South Africa doesn't want them to be able to operate to capacity. By keeping them in a state of disruption, and they force the frontline states to use South African ports, which gives them that much extra leverage politically over the frontline states. It's for that reason, mainly as far as I understand it, that Renamo has been nurtured the way it has by South Africa. The main road and rail corridor from Zimbabwe to the coast is open, thanks to the efforts of Zimbabwean troops mainly, and Tanzanian troops as well. And there is another road and rail corridor or rail corridor rather, leading from Zambia to one of the northern ports that's in a good position now. It's starting to come back. There's some British gentlemen who assured me they were not mercenaries, helping the Mozambican government train a force of troops specifically to guard that northern rail line, and apparently with the approval of the British government. There's only about half a dozen of them there, and that and the Canadian efforts to build a rail line that's landmine proof, which we've been to some extent successful in doing, have helped out a lot. But
So that's where specific support would go from
That's one area. That's government to government support. This sort of standard bilateral aid has a particular railroad, among other things, and we're also now. Shortly after I was there, it was decided that so-called non-lethal military aid could be increased to the frontline states, and that would include Mozambique. That's boots and bootlaces and stuff like that, and tents, which may seem like very little, but it's actually very important because most of the Mozambican soldiers that I saw were sorely lacking in the most basic things. Personally, I don't have a problem with. I would think it would be a good thing if we bought them all a new gun, because it's at that point in things there that there's really not much they can do in a peaceful way, because they're not dealing with a reasoning opposition. They're dealing with maybe John Smith could make some headway, because in a certain sense, Renamo is like the worst of the biker image that we've been handed, but there's not much room for talking and not much opportunity to talk. The country itself is beautiful, and the people seem to be handling things as well as you could expect people to handle them under those circumstances. There are approximately 2 million people on the edge of starvation because of all this terror in the countryside. The farmers can't farm, and they move into the cities to get away from all that violence. And then you get a twofold effect. You get overcrowding in the cities, and you get the food supply cut off. So it's quite dire circumstances. But there's a lot of international help going in, and a lot of, in fact, even now, the Frelimo government has sort of moved away from its Marxist position and is moving toward something like social democracy under pressure from the International Monetary Fund and USAID and that sort of thing, which in their circumstances may be okay. I don't really know what that means to them. I know that as Marxist hardliners in the beginning, they made some pretty serious tactical errors with the economy, but that was a result of trying to apply Russian theory to an African context, and it didn't really work very well.
How do you see your music progressing in
Okay, back to music. How do you see your music progressing into the 90s? Can you repeat the second half again? Do you make a conscious effort to... All right. Yeah, have you made a conscious effort to keep up with the times, or does your music just follow you? What you're thinking, where you're going?
It's sort of in between, I don't know what my music is going to be like between now and tomorrow, I haven't written anything new for a little while. I'm working on a couple of things, but I don't really know. It's too unformed yet to say where it's going. I don't tend to think very far into the future as a rule about that sort of thing. It's just whatever comes. And I suppose I do make an effort to keep up with what's going on in terms of listening. And that's bound to have an effect on what I'm doing, but it's a kind of oblique effect. It's not a deliberate attempt to make the music sound contemporary at any particular point. It's just, like I was saying earlier, if I hear things that I like, they're going to end up influencing the music in some way, But it's, too soon to say what direction the next album will be like. Well, actually, no. The next album will be a live album that we recorded a week or so ago with the band that will be here tonight. But after that, I don't know.
At the back. Yes.
What extent would you call yourself a pacifist? Because of the right of those or where would you draw the line?
To what extent would you call yourself a pacifist? after what you've written and said about Nicaragua and Mozambique, where would you draw the line?
I don't think I have a satisfactory answer for that. For me personally, it's never been put to the test. I think pacifism is an admirable position to take, and probably the most desirable stance from which to view the political world, but I'm not quite sure that I'm a pacifist. There's something in me that likes all that stuff, too. That finds, well, likes is, I guess I have to qualify that a bit. It's not a gratuitous sensation, but ever since I was an infant, practically, I've loved weapons, and and although I deplore,
hearing out of him today.
I deplore their use. It's a funny kind of paradox for me personally, but it means nothing to anyone else. It's just, I don't think violence is the answer to anything. But if I or someone I loved were attacked, I don't know what I'd do. In Mozambique, I felt if somebody handed me a rifle and said, "There, go guard that convoy," I would have done it, because it would have felt like part of the Mozambican experience to do it, and it would have been a natural thing. When I wrote Rocket Launcher, I felt genuinely like if I'd had the means to shoot down those Guatemalan helicopters, I would have done so. But at the same time, that's a gut response that if I have time to think is not the one I'll end up living with. It's I'm gonna. If there is time to think, I'm going to stop and say, wait a minute, that's not really how I should deal with this. But I don't have a kind of capital letter noun to put on that.
I don't know how far you've gone on with it, but a lot of the really good material seems to come out of foreign locations. How would you comment on that? And secondly, are there any other brilliant things besides Italian?
I can answer the second one, no. There are no other dates apart from the Town and Country, which is the 23rd of September. The first one was that a lot of your good stuff comes from the foreign trips. What are your comments on that?
For most creative people, I think it's necessary to, or creative people, I guess it's not quite like that. It's people who spend a lot of time using their creative elements. It's necessary to constantly shake yourself out of your habits of mind. And some people do that through drugs, some people do it through constantly changing sexual partners. For me, travel has occupied that position a lot. There was a time when there were other things, but that goes way back too far to be of any interest. But travel does do that, especially to new places. It's not an accident that what to me are maybe among the most interesting songs about Central America that I've done came out of that first trip, because it was the most shockingly vivid encounter with that reality. Subsequent visits to third world countries have had less of an effect that way, because you tend to see the same themes repeated, But whatever it takes, if it's being in an atmosphere where you don't speak the language and don't understand what's around you, then there's a dislocation that goes with that liberates some part of you that becomes stodgy otherwise, I'm sure there are other ways around that, but it's just been circumstantial that for me, because of the amount of traveling I've been given to do in a way, that it's had that effect.
I've got the. Can you repeat what the actual question is? It's sort of how Bruce is feeling about his more recent politically based songs.
Yeah, do you put any more value?
Yeah, is there any more value on those than on the older ones?
Well, I mean, I always think that the newer stuff is more important than the older stuff. I mean, but that's me. You know, I don't know what it means to other people. Some people obviously prefer that less messagey, as you put it, older stuff. In a way, I don't think it was all that much less messagey, though. You know, I mean, it was more internally directed and more looking at the state of the soul, if I can put it that way, rather than the state of the world. But there was a point where the state of the soul and the state of the world became inseparable, and it just seemed natural to write about the things I was seeing around me. But I mean, ultimately, if you want to try to assign a relative value to those two things, then I don't think one is more important than the other. I mean, obviously you can't do anything about the world if your soul isn't happening, you know. So.
Any women out here want to ask questions? Wave, because
There's one.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, recently I think I watched a television program, and it was about revolutions and how most of the recent revolutions, most revolutions, they may start off being liberating, but they nearly all seem to go through a period of repression, like the French Revolution and Iran. Do you think that could possibly happen in Nicaragua?
The question is, having the person who asked the question has seen something recently that pointed out that most revolutions seem to be liberating initially and then result in a period of repression. And she referred to both the French Revolution and Iran, thank you. I haven't had any sleep for a whole weekend. Do you think that could happen in Nicaragua?
Anything can happen. You can't say that, no, without meaning to refer to my own songs. No, it's a good question, and it's one that I think a lot of Nicaraguans have on their minds too. You know, not only the people who are ruled, but also the Sandinistas themselves. It's a question that people ask themselves. You know, what are we doing here? And of course, having to live with a war situation invites a level of repression or of potential repression that wouldn't necessarily be there otherwise. And that's sort of part and parcel of all of those revolutions. Every one of them has been attacked from outside for various reasons. It'd be interesting to see what happened if you had a revolution that was not subjected to that kind of pressure. But maybe you wouldn't have to have a revolution if there weren't that kind of outside pressure supporting the status quo anyway, you know. I don't know. It's possible. But I don't see it. I mean, the view of Nicaragua that I have been able to get over the years, it doesn't suggest that it's about to happen. You know, you can't rule it out. And I think it's something they have to be vigilant against.
But even with the Contras having less power since the American elections, Nicaragua is really facing desperate economic difficulties, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's the way, partly, it must be the way they can cope with those without doing something that appears repressive.
Yeah, and nobody should make the mistake of thinking that it's over just because the Contras have been discredited and allowed to peter out. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Nicaragua still. I mean, the economic embargo is still in place. The pressure is not going to stop from the states. It's just the tactics have changed. So they'll still be faced with what will be a subtle or less suitable for pro-Nicaragua propaganda, if you want, than what's been going on to date. And that'll be a more dangerous situation in a way for them to be in. Now that, I mean, I think the shit's really hitting the fan about now. You know, that's the Contras have never been a serious threat to the government of Nicaragua. They've been a threat to the lives of people in the areas they've been operating in a major way, but and definitely a nuisance factor, more than a nuisance factor, but they haven't represented any serious threat to actually change the political system. But much greater things. I mean, the whole concept of low-intensity warfare is based on the 1-2 punch kind of, we'll good cop, bad cop. We'll sock it to them and soften them up with violence first, and then we'll hit them with the economic stuff and really knock them over. So it'll be interesting to see now what happens. I mean, it already was announced over the BBC that one of these Colombian drug barons was believed to be hiding in Nicaragua, and I mean, that's just, it maybe he is, I don't know, but I mean, it seems to me less than likely, and it's a revival of that old tactic that was used a few years ago to try to link the Sandinistas with the cocaine trade, when in fact it was the Contras themselves who were carrying on the cocaine trade, and the CIA with the involvement of even the U.S. Air Force. So it's where that's going to go, the propaganda war, I don't know.
I'm taking my time because I'm still looking for women. What does Bruce the man do when he's not being a rock star and a traveller?
I don't even know. I mean, between work and other kinds of travel, the last couple of years I haven't really done much but that. I've become quite fond of horseback riding, and do that whenever I get a chance. Once in a while I get to read a book and hang out, basically. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a non-specific thing. I have a sea kayak that I haven't had much chance to use, but I'm looking forward to getting some time with that too.
Yeah.
Did you ever send pictures to the women who were working at Northern in Nicaragua? And is there any chance of a date in Northern Ireland?
Did you ever send the pictures to the women who were laundering in Nicaragua? And any chance of a date in Northern Ireland?
Actually, I can't remember if I sent the pictures. I know the guy who was with me did, so we got covered one way or another. But I think eventually I did do that, because there was a few other things. When you go to a place like Nicaragua, people tend to put in orders for things, like guitarists will want finger picks and strings and all that kind of stuff that they can't readily get. And so I know that, over the years I've sent a few packets of things like that, but I can't honestly remember about the pictures one way or the other. But as far as a gig in Northern Ireland goes, I need a phone call. Somebody has to call and say, "Come on over, we'll pay you," and then I'll come.
What's your number?
It's on the album covers.
Yeah. How much practice do you put in on guitar? Do you tend to gear up for tours?
I definitely practice hard before a tour, because I hardly ever practice in between working. It's like I used to be quite disciplined about that, and I'm no longer. But of course, the band does quite a bit of rehearsing. If it's going to be a band tour, or if it's a solo tour, then I do a lot of practicing on my own for 3 weeks or so before I start, just to make sure that I don't embarrass myself too badly.
Yeah, in the blue, standing up, yeah.
I couldn't quite make out the last part of it. Just did you get it?
Yeah, I think Big Circumstance having done quite well in the States, do you think that perhaps some of the previous albums touched a nerve politically and therefore didn't do as well? Because Big Circumstance has done better, hasn't it, than the last
well,
one?
actually, it's done less well than Stealing Fire so far, as far as I know. I mean, I guess you'd have to check
That's a pretty
with
powerful album.
record people to be sure of that. But I think, The question had to do with the
Yeah.
political content really touching the nerve of the powers that be in the States to the point where it'll only get college play. And it's certainly true that the record is getting not much more than college radio play, although it has gotten good attention in that area. I think that the political aspect of it may account for some of that, but a lot of it is just that it doesn't sound like the formats that those radio stations are obliged to limit themselves to most of the time for reasons of marketing and demographics and all that. There's a very limited range of what musically of what American radio stations will play, the mainstream stations. Canada's a little bit less limited that way, but still suffers from the same problem. If you don't sound like one of several possible sounds, you're not played, period, no matter what you're saying. The political thing obviously can't account for too great a part of it because Rocket Launcher, for instance, got a lot of mainstream radio play, although it may be that the programmers didn't exactly listen to what it was about. They heard the anger and they thought that would go over, or something. I don't know.
Oh, one in front and then one behind.
I think it's been a couple of annoying things that people like Jackson Brown, Sting, that have made a record about him recently. Jackson Brown about 2 years ago. And then they sell millions of copies on the radio as a third to do that. How do you feel?
How do you feel about the fact that Jackson Browne and Sting have recently written a lot of stuff about Central America and got a lot of airplay, sold a lot of stuff, and you've been doing it for years and haven't got as much?
Well, I don't know. It's in the end, it's not so important who gets the attention as that the attention is focused where it should be focused. And Jackson in particular, with regard to Nicaragua, has done a lot of really good work. I don't know too much about what Sting is up to. He's certainly been more visible of late with regard to Brazil and all that, but I'm not sure about that myself, one way or the other. But I know Jackson, and I know that he's sincere and that he's done a lot of really good stuff, and I'm just glad to see that work being done. He can do more than I can because he's already got that position in the hierarchy, and that makes him more visible and more useful, therefore. Yeah, the comment was that Jackson's been banned on radio stations and criticized for his political involvements. I'm not too sure about the details of that. I know that he doesn't get a lot of radio play, but certainly, because he had the prior visibility, he's the one that the journalists will look at and go, oh yeah, right, this guy's doing this now. Some of those cynics have questioned his sincerity, but I don't find it to be at fault at all.
Yeah, you were earlier joined 126.
Yeah, the earlier albums are pretty difficult to get hold of in this country. Is there any chance that they might become easier?
Well, that's hard to say. I guess it depends on a whole lot of factors. We've had a hell of a time getting out anything here, really, over the years. And, things are better now than they've ever been. If the progress continues, then hopefully at some point it will be viable for a record company to put out the back catalog. In the meantime, I guess you have to get the German imports or something, because they're pretty well all out in Germany. And there's a guy over here that's been trying for a long time.
Have you got any plans to travel in the Middle East, or have you travelled in the Middle East?
I've never been to the Middle East. There was a Christian group in the States. I don't know if you're familiar with Sojourners, whose members approached me about the possibility of going to the Palestinian refugee camps in Beirut and also in Israel. The timing was bad because I was in the middle of a tour, and then since that overture was made, that person's no longer with Sojourners. So that's the closest I've come to going there. But it's certainly, there's all kinds of of reasons to go, I'd go if I had the opportunity. Yeah. So actually, years ago, I had the idea that I'd like to go and spend some time in Jerusalem and long enough to get some songs and produce an album that was just about Jerusalem. I don't know whether that'll ever happen at this point. That was before I started doing all the other traveling that I've been doing. So who knows where it'll go? But I'd like to go there.
I think we've probably got time for a couple more. Yeah, back. Tell us a bit about the rest of the band, how you picked them and their backgrounds.
It's pretty circumstantial. You know, I generally have tended to try to get the best people I could afford, whoever they were, you know. Mike and Ferg and I have been working together now for a few years, and it's turned into something that's not only based on money, but it was originally based on what they could do with my music, you know. I mean, that's, since I'm not a band, I hire mercenaries basically to work with me, and that's the criteria is just get the best people you can, you know. Fergus Jemison Marsh, the stick player, is the brother of Hugh Marsh, who played violin with me for a long time, and that's how I met Fergus and how I became acquainted with the stick, too. Mike Slosky, the drummer, is one of the best drummers on the Canadian scene, and he's somebody, well, that originally we got because he was the best, and subsequently has become a friend as well.
There's a little group over there want to know what the stick is.
The stick is, it's properly known as the Chapman stick. It was invented a few years ago by a guy named Emmett Chapman in California. And it basically looks like a 2x6 with strings on it. It's got frets like a guitar. It's got 10 strings. It's played by tapping the strings against the fingerboard as opposed to picking like you do with a guitar. And because of that, you're able to use all 10 fingers, which it goes in range from below the electric bass to the top end of the electric guitar, and therefore can function in a way like a keyboard or like a combination bass and rhythm guitar, or, you know, in a number of ways that are unique to the instrument itself. It can also be, and we do run the top end of it through the upper register of it through a couple of synthesizers, so there's a wide range of sounds available to us. Other than that, you'll just have to see it, I guess, you know.
Yeah, last one. You'll have to repeat that because I was distracted by people talking behind me, sorry.
Shut up back there, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, the question was that, do I fear a backlash as a result of the trendiness of involvements in causes like Nicaragua? I think that's a fair way to sum up what you asked. Well, anytime you get anything trendy, of course, you know, there's going to be some kind of backlash. I don't personally think that it will take the form of that it'll take an unduly negative form. I mean, I think just people will lose interest. The media people will lose interest, and then the public will lose the opportunity to know. And critics will start saying things like, "Oh, another stupid album about stupid Nicaragua," you know, and things like that, because it will be contrary to the furthering of their careers if they stay with anything for too long. You know, we know all about that with respect to critics. That's going to happen, of course. You know, I mean, basically what we've seen here is a window that's been open for a little while, and it may stay open for a while longer, where there's a tolerance for issue-oriented, quote-unquote, music. You know, and a tolerance in the media and the middle people that exist between the artists and the public. I mean, if it was just me talking to you, then there's an instant feedback. If you're tired of hearing about a particular thing, you're going to let me know, and then I have to live with that one way or another. But that isn't the way it works. There's radio, there's the press, there's all those things that they're supposed to act as a conduit somehow from me to you and you back again, and it's a very poor excuse for communication most of the time, you know. So that will, of course, sooner or later anyway, close down, and we won't be able to do the things we're doing with it.